Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. Hope you're all having a good new year. Yeah, we are in a new year. I haven't seen you guys since last year. That's probably the only time I can make that joke, so go ahead and get that out of the way. This is a kind of unique day for me. I try to get on the show and we focus on whatever the news of pop culture is, like Morbius got just postponed again. Is it due to COVID? Are they afraid it's not going to be good? Or are they just trying to keep the theater clear for Spider-Man to make every penny? That would be a great topic for today. But I think the answer is probably a little bit of all of that. Theaters are closing. Toronto theaters have just closed. So Sony's being safe. They're moving Morbius back to April 1st. And then, so we'll get them then. Not like there's another superhero movie coming out in between. Well, there's that thing called The Batman. But other than that, there's no Marvel one. So I do like both Marvel and DC. I'm not one of the people that says you can only like one. No, I like them both. So I'm looking forward to The Batman and I'm looking forward to Morbius and Doctor Strange and all the other movies. But the number one movie on my list right now of anticipated is Death on the Nile. I'm a huge fan of Kenneth Branagh and of Agatha Christie and Hercule Poirot. So I cannot wait to see the second outing of Branagh as Poirot. So, but we've been waiting for that for a while. But I'm just rambling because I'm going to bring it around to some more personal stuff. Morbius will never be released. It's the New Mutants of Sony. New Mutants finally did get released, but after being delayed. And what's funny is I haven't watched it yet. I have it right here. There's the disc is right there. I just haven't put it in yet and watched it. So, all right. So 2 things came up. Before I started the Dan Wickline Show, I have my own YouTube page, and my top viewed video that I did was a thing called Psychology of Villainy, a focus on Lex Luthor. It's about a 25-minute video where I take a deep dive into Lex Luthor's history, how he's been portrayed in the media and in film and television, and how most of the time they've gotten it wrong. The few times they've gotten it right, it's been because they really looked at the character. But every time he's in a movie, they make him a megalomaniac. So I did that, and it skyrocketed. Of all my stuff, it's got 12,000 views and a bunch of likes, and it's really great. And I wanted to do another one. I wanted to take another character, and I decided to do one on the Riddler because I think he's another one that gets misinterpreted. A lot of people talk about the fact that he's compelled to do these crimes as being OCD, and it's not. It doesn't match up. But there's something called obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and when you merge that with the comorbidity of bipolar 1, you really lock into that character. So I wrote it up. I wrote the long form essay back in May. Then we started doing the Dan Wickline Show. I ended up in the emergency room with pneumonia. And I also changed from computers, and in doing so got the new version of Adobe Premiere that I did not know how to use. So I just kind of kept putting it off. And finally, on New Year's Eve, I had decided I was just going to stay home and relax. And instead, I dove in and started editing it. And on New Year's Day, I posted the second one, the second Psychology of Villainy, The Riddler, and that's up now. So if you guys want to take a look at that, it's something I'm very proud of. So, and it's also fun as part of the writing process to really take a deep dive into a character. So this is really digging into the psychological aspects of the character. So check it out. It's on my YouTube channel, Dan Wickline 1, I think it is, but you guys can see that. Now, that aside, so I've been coming off of that high, and people are watching it and getting good feedback on it already. But this morning I found out that a Kickstarter that I'm part of launched. This is a book that Nick Barucci came to me and said he wanted to do a certain type of book. He wanted to do, books like Sunstone and Swing. These are doing really well in the market. And he wanted something like that. Well, I wasn't going to do, I'm not just going to do the same thing. But for the last 25 years, I've been a photographer besides doing writing and stuff like this. So I have this history in the photography business with working with models, doing glamour photos, nude photos, all that stuff. I've got published work. You can find it, again, if you look it up online, but, watch your sensor, watch where you're at. Some of the stuff is risque and, nude. So, well, when he pitched the idea to me to do a book, he said, well, we want you to do a full graphic novel, and then we'll get you an artist and we'll get a cover and we'll put it out through a Kickstarter. I went, okay. So I came up with this idea to take some different strange events, not strange, just events that most people don't live through, just situations that I've been through that I find kind of unique. And I've sewn them together in this romantic, erotic tale of a advertising photographer who gets pulled into the world of an up-and-coming supermodel and is just kind of swept into this insanity. And there's betrayal, there's betrayal, bondage, and everything else you'd want in a book like this. And they got Carlos Renault to do the artwork. It's absolutely gorgeous. Every page in there is stunning. He did an amazing job. And then we went out to get some cover artists. We had kind of a wish list. And I got to talk to Michael DePascal, who is someone that I worked with when I was back with Avatar doing the God is Dead book. He and I did an 8-part backup story for God is Dead. So I approached him, and he did a cover, and he did both a regular cover and a naughty cover. Yeah, show the DePascal cover. Yeah. So he did that. I thought it was gorgeous. I thought, okay, we've got our cover. We got our interiors by Carlos Renault. We're good to go whenever they're going to launch it. Well, Nick got a hold of me and said, I got you a couple other covers. Well, he got Mirka Andolfo, who is doing the book Sweet Paprika, to do this cover, which, again, is just stunning. Love this cover. And then I don't know how he did it, because I even approached him, and this particular artist was way too busy. And he's got a name for doing these kind of books anyway, and that's Stepan Sejic. And Nick talked Stepan into doing a cover, and that is just brilliant. So the Kickstarter launched today, started at 6 o'clock, at 11 p.m. Pacific time, and by 11:30 it funded. Just half hour, boom. That's before they got the press releases sent out. That's before, we really started hyping it. That was just base out the people who've been, I talked about it a bit online, a few other people did, and these people just dove right in. Well, now we are 2.5 hours in, 3 hours in, and we've tripled our original goal, and it's still climbing. We got 150 backers, and it seems to be climbing. We're about to announce some stretch goals. I think we should, by tomorrow, be announcing the stretch goals. This book means a lot to me, so that's why I'm talking about it. This is a 120-page original graphic novel. It's not superheroes. It's not murder mysteries. It's just a slice of life type comic in the same way of stuff like Sunstone and Swing. And I hope you guys check it out. I mean, at least take a look. You got to see the Carlos Renault artwork is stunningly gorgeous. Everything, every person that worked on this book besides me is absolutely brilliant. I'll let you judge whether the writing's brilliant or not yourself, but the art on this book, the covers on this book, what they're putting together. They've told me about some of the stretch goals, which I think are fantastic. We've got some other ones we're still talking about to figure out exactly how they're going to work if we need them. Some might dive into my own photography past. We'll see. But yeah, this is a big project for me. So I'm hoping that that you guys will check it out, you know. And Cal says soon I'll be interviewing myself on the Dan Wickline Show. I just need to get 2 cameras so we can, you know, kind of like the Ryan George comedy stuff.
So I'm looking at the Kickstarter right now, and you're up to 152 backers. Once I finish clicking this button. But so here's my question.
Yes.
Are you working, because you have to sign some of these. If people pledge at a certain level, you have to sign the book.
Yes.
Are you starting to work out your arm so that your hand doesn't hurt?
I'm ready.
All right. Because you've seen those videos of Neil Gaiman having to like stick his hand in an ice bucket because he signed so many books.
I would happily have to do that. If that's the case, I would be happy to.
I just want to be the first person publicly online to say congratulations, buddy.
Thank you. That was very kind of you. And yeah, I'm beside myself thrilled about this project. I am hoping that not only will, you know, it continue to do well, maybe they'll ask me to do more. And, you know, it's been a while since I've had a comic in print. You know, The Freeze was the last thing I had done. And I've got a couple other things that are kind of floating out there that are waiting to be published, but I'm excited to get this one out there. I wrote it quite a bit ago. It's just with the pandemic and everything, things got backlogged. So I think I wrote it in 2019. So it's a couple of years old now, but it is really neat to see it finally come out, and I am excited. So, all right. I think I have spent enough time self-promoting. Lisa tells me that I'm horrible at it, and I really should get help and not do it myself, but that's what we got. Okay, let's move on to our topic for today. After watching Hawkeye, and if you haven't seen the finale and know the twist, then it's kind of a spoiler, but just so you know, we are going to talk about one tiny element of Hawkeye, and that is who owned the watch and what it means. So run away now if you don't want to know. Okay. So the watch ended up belonging to his wife, Laura Barton, who, of course, was played by the amazing Linda Cardellini. This is the watch that the Tracksuit Mafia broke in at the auction to get. Now, I still think there's some plot issues there of why are they breaking into the auction, if it's an auction run by Wilson Fisk, and was it he who they wanted the watch, or who wanted the watch? How did Maya end up with it? Did it not supposed to? I mean, there's a lot of questions having to do with that watch. That aside, when we see the watch and we turn it over, or she turns it over, and we see the Shield logo on the back with the number 19 at the bottom, though they never come out specifically and say what it means, it's pretty obvious what it means. That this is her watch, so she was number 19, or Agent 19 of Shield. Now, if you've got any history of Marvel Comics, then you might know that Agent 19 has gone by a few other names in the comics, including Barbara or Bobby Morse, Huntress for like one issue, and Mockingbird. Mockingbird, of course, being the character that in the comics is married to Hawkeye for a while. So this opens up some interesting backstory possibilities. It could really be fun to dive into in maybe a second season of Hawkeye, in either flashbacks to her and Clint working together as kind of the Mr. and Mrs. Smith of spies, or you could have her come out of retirement and have to work with him now, which I think would be more fun to see them kind of, she's getting back in the game. I could really see this being a neat second season of Hawkeye. Maybe Hawkeye gets kidnapped and she has to work with Kate Bishop to get him back or something like that. I could see, or he goes deep undercover or something. There's plenty of ways you could bring her character back in, and that's just my thought. But so I think there's a lot of potential there, but not everyone was happy to see the number on the watch. Now, while having Vincent D'Onofrio reprise his role as Wilson Fisk meant that the Netflix Daredevil series might be in whole or part canon to the MCU. Just by having Vincent D'Onofrio, then Charlie Cox pop up where he popped up, you kind of saying, well, something like what we saw on Netflix exists in the MCU. Now, how much of it, we don't know, but it's still a possibility. It's still, that's connected. They haven't done anything to say it doesn't. Where you look at Luke Cage and Mahershala Ali is now Blade, where he was Cottonmouth there. And over on, there's other shows that seem like it's starting to break, or they tried to get Jessica Henwick to play in Shang-Chi, which would have meant that she wouldn't be back as Colleen Wing anymore. So, and she still wants to be able to play Colleen Wing. So we'll have to see if that happens or not. But so just having Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox show up kind of means that Daredevil still has the possibility of existing in the MCU. While pointing out that Laura was Agent 19 kind of puts the existence of ABC's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in doubt. While the series featured Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson and had appearances by Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury and Colby Smulders as Anita Hill and Jamie Alexander as Lady Sif, the Coulson in the MCU died in the original Avengers movie has never been revived. That's not considered canon, or most likely it's not, which means that Adriana Palicki's portrayal of Bobby Morse as Mockingbird on the show is probably also not canon. I know a lot of people who loved the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show wanted it to be canon. So now these same people are scrambling to come up with ways that it could both work. Like, well, what if the Mockingbird wasn't just a title, but it was a program in the same way the Black Widows are? They're like S.H.I.E.L.D.'s version of the Black Widows, and Laura Barton just happened to be one of them, and she was Agent 19, and Bobby Morris is another one. This seems like a stretch to me. And we have to accept that not every character from the comics will get their moment to shine in the MCU. Not Omega the Unknown is not going to get his own series. Okay? The Frog, the Stilt Man, they might get a quick nod, a glimpse. Whizzer, Whizzer is never going to get his own show, but he got a nod in Jessica Jones. So we have to accept that not everybody's going to get their moment to shine. Some of them are going to be supporting characters at best. And this might be what they planned all along when they thought, oh, we'll have Hawkeye have a wife, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of all put together, well, she's Bobby Morris, or she's, and they do that all the time. Well, they'll use one name and it's like, oh, that's Laura Barbara Morris, or something like that. So we'll have to see how they work that out. But I realize that some of you might not even know that much about Mockingbird. I mean, she's not a top tier character. She's been used a lot lately, but she's got a pretty bizarre origin and backstory. Even the people her first appearance wasn't necessarily by the people that created her, which, again, just shows you how weird this is. What happened is that Len Wein, Wizard needs a new name. To paraphrase Princess Bride, I think it doesn't mean what it used to mean. Yes, it does. Exactly. All right, so Dr. Barbara Morse was originally created by Len Wein and Neil Adams and was originally intended for a magazine called Savage Tales #2. And she was going to appear with the Man-Thing. And the book got canceled after the first issue. So they had this character they created, didn't do anything with, and they had this backup story just sitting in the file that they'd already been done by Len Wein and Neil Adams. Well, Astonishing Tales #6 was coming out in 1971 with, so Gary Conway decided, well, I'm going to take that character you had, and I'm going to make her a potential supporting character, maybe a love interest for Kazar, who's starring in Astonishing Tales. So, again, Gary Conway and I think George Evans was the artist on it, were the first ones to actually have Barbara Morse in print, even though the first story was done by the other two. Convoluted, I know. But, Barry Smith. Barry Smith did that first issue. Now, other creators who have made a significant contribution to the character were Roy Thomas, Mike Friedrich, Archie Goodwin, George Evans, Stephen Grant, and Mark Grunwald, who may have done the most with her. But so her first appearance isn't much, as it's kind of a silly thing. She shows up at the country estate of Lord Kevin Plunder, the real name of Kazar, and declares to the butler that she must see him as it's a matter of the fate of the world. Now, this version was a brunette, which she's a blonde now, and she hinted at having psychic abilities. She actually told the butler that she had never met Lord Plunder, but she feels that she knows him because she can feel people in her mind. Now, that was it. That was her first appearance. She showed up. That was it. In the next issue, she's still at the estate, and the butler tells her, "I'm sorry, but Lord Plunder is in the Savage Land." And that's her entire appearance in the next issue. So, not a lot going on there. Well, the next time we see her, it's actually in issue 8. And she's now a blonde. And she's traveling with her fiancé, Paul, as they crash a plane into, you guessed it, the Savage Land. Now, Kazar rescues them and leads them through the area. And they're doing, a lot of stuff's going on, but by issue 12, they decide to use the story that Len Wein and Neil Adams did, and they basically had this flashback story to tie into this whole thing. So they ended up doing this flashback with the Man-Thing in the middle of a Kazar story. Now, the way it works is that, and it's basically her origin, is Dr. Barbara Morse is working on Project Gladiator, a research project in the Florida Everglades, trying to replicate the super soldier serum that created Captain America, which, again, fits into the MCU perfectly. Everybody's trying to replicate that serum. Well, she gets kidnapped by AIM and then rescued by the Man-Thing, which ties into the current story as Barbara and Dr. Paul Allen, her fiancé, were looking for Kazar to get him to help them with the Man-Thing. Now, this whole thing wraps up in the next issue, where we learn that, you're going to love this, Paul was secretly a double agent working for AIM. But Barbara knew this all along, and she was actually assisting S.H.I.E.L.D. and just pretending to love Paul to find out what he was up to. Paul is killed by the Man-Thing, and in the end, Barbara hopes she can just go back to being a scientist. Comics. Comics of the 70s. Well, the next writer to come in was Mike Friedrich, and he decided to keep Barbara around, but he started just referring to her as Bobby. And he made her Kazar's regular companion and occasional love interest, as well as making her a fully trained S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. So she went from a doctor who was just assisting S.H.I.E.L.D. to now she's a fully trained agent. And they work together on such, cases that include, they go up against some villains. These are some of the great ones. The Pusher, Gemini, Victorious, Gog, and the Plunderer, who I believe is Kazar's brother, if I remember that correctly. And she starts wearing these tinted glasses and this red one-piece bodysuit with a pair of boots, and we learn that she is designated as Agent 19 for S.H.I.E.L.D. Her time with Kazar doesn't really last too much longer, though, because around this time they decided to introduce the character of Shauna the She-Devil. And Kazar seemed to be more interested in what they referred to as a jungle-friendly warrior type over the spy. So she ended up staying around until Savage Tales number 8 in 1975, and then she was gone. Well, but not forgotten. And a year later, Friedrich was working with artist George Evans, and they were asked to do a 20-page story for a one-shot black and white book that they called Marvel Super Action number 1. And this was in January of 1976. And editor Archie Goodwin suggested that they do some kind of female superhero, and they should use the name Huntress. Well, having just had this super spy character, or the spy character that he'd been working on, Friedrich decided to use Bobby, but he had her drop out of S.H.I.E.L.D. and work with the senator to bring down corruption in the Latin American branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. So basically, she left S.H.I.E.L.D. to investigate S.H.I.E.L.D., but specifically in Latin America. Now, this would be the only time she would use that name, and then would disappear again for 4 years. So she was the Huntress for one issue, one time, and that was it. Now, this is where things change. We're going to switch now to Mark Grunwald, who was working on Spider-Woman. He wanted to kind of come up with a whole rogues gallery for her. Different villain characters, stuff like that. And he came up with this idea for a character called Mockingbird, and had a roughed out idea who she is. Working with writer Stephen Grant, they figured out her powers and her weaponry and stuff like that. And I think they had a rough sketch. Well, later on, Stephen was working on Marvel Team Up, and he wanted to do something different. He got tired of using the same old characters, so he talked to his editor, who was Mark Grunwald, and the two of them decided, well, we should just revamp the Bobby Morris character and merge it with this Mockingbird character. So this happened in Marvel Team Up number 95. And, and here she still continued to look into corruption at S.H.I.E.L.D. That was what the story was. But at this point, now S.H.I.E.L.D. thought she was a bad guy and were hunting her. So she was being hunted while hunting. Huntress probably would have been still a good name for her, but I think we can all pretty much figure out why they stopped using the name Huntress. Just saying. Because DC kind of revitalized their Huntress in 1977, right before this. So now she, working with Spider-Man and a little bit of help from Nick Fury, brings down this corrupt branch director named Carl DeLandon, but she's wounded, like severely wounded, and left in the care of Nick Fury. But he knows she's innocent, so he's clearing her name. And that's, how that episode ends. That she's back with S.H.I.E.L.D. and she's going by the name of Mockingbird. Now, Grunwald would then take the character with him as he was going to write this new Hawkeye miniseries in 1983. Well, he basically took the same character, had her investigating cross technologies, and Clint just happens to be Clint Barton just happens to be the head of security for this company because, well, superheroing and archery doesn't pay the bills. They end up, they do the standard comic book thing where, of course, they fight against each other and then they become allies to work against Crossfire, who, of course, is Darren Cross. Did you realize that Darren Cross from the Ant-Man movies, who becomes Yellow Jacket, was actually a different character in the comics named Crossfire? Yeah, from here. And they end up working together and going up against Crossfire. And it's in this miniseries that he sacrifices his hearing to save them. There's a mind control ray, there's a mind control thing that emits a sound that makes them attack each other, and he takes a sonic arrow and bites it, shorting out his hearing so that he won't hear the sound and he can stop Mockingbird, without hurting her. Now, through all this, there's this kind of romantic thing growing between them. And we get to the end of the episode, and she starts to come on to him, and he can't hear anything. So he's like, oh, yeah, well, great working with you. Gotta go. And he leaves. Well, we get to the last page, and you see the two of them together in a hot tub in the Pocono Mountains. And we discovered that she's like, no, I'm hitting on you. You're not just going to walk away. She chases him down, finds out that his hearing's now screwed up. And the two of them end up getting married. They elope to the Poconos. And that's how the series ends, But in this whole thing, we also get a little bit deeper in depth to her origin about, how she was a biology student working for Project Gladiator. And it was partially sponsored by S.H.I.E.L.D. This led to her joining up with the spy organization. So, they tried to kind of fix up a little bit of her weird-ass backstory. Now, after the miniseries, Roger Stern was going to start the new miniseries for a West Coast version of, jumping ahead here, Roger Stern was actually working on the Avengers book with Mark Gruenwald editing and had Hawkeye and Mockingbird move in as a married couple into the Avengers mansion and start being Avengers. But the vision suggests that the two of them should go to the West Coast and start an Avengers branch out there, West Coast Avengers. Now, this makes you wonder just how bad these two were, that as soon as they showed up, Vision goes, you know what, you guys ought to go to California. Yeah. Were the walls that thin in a Avengers mansion? I don't know. Well, they kick it off with a 4-issue miniseries of the West Coast Avengers, and it's all about Mockingbird, now a full-fledged Avenger, working with Hawkeye to set up this new branch, put the team together. There's a whole story about how they get the compound or the house that they're based in, and there's a tie to that in the Hawkeye series. The name of Kate Bishop's aunt that their apartment they're staying in is the same name, Myra or something or other, is the same woman who owned the house. And there's a whole story about how she sacrifices herself when the Avengers get attacked and she becomes an honorary Avenger. It's a neat backstory on that. But so they basically set up this second team. And the book goes for a while. They do 4 issues and it turns into an ongoing series. And writer Steve Englehart, after a while, comes up with this story where he has the entire team sent back to 1876, and Mockingbird gets kidnapped by the Phantom Rider, who was also known as Lincoln Slade. And if you're not familiar with the Phantom Rider, he's on a white horse. He wears all white cowboy hat, white mask. But he's not necessarily a good guy here. He abducts, drugs, and brainwashes Bobby into forgetting her previous life and makes her believe that she's in love with him, which gets real dicey when you realize that they fool around together and she's not of her own free will. So it's all kind of a rape story. And then she breaks free of the mind control and seeks revenge on Slade. And while she doesn't actually kill him, she chooses not to save him as he's hanging off the edge of a cliff and allows him to plunge to his death. That gray area of whether or not you kill. Now, upon learning that she let Slade die, Hawkeye is just furious. He harshly disapproves of this, which is a horrible reaction. Come on. And it basically forces her to leave the team, and she, for a while, teams up with Tyra and Moon Knight, and they do some adventures and stuff. But, let's go ahead and take a quick break. We're supposed to do those, so we'll do a quick break. We'll come back with the rest of the history of Mockingbird. Be right back.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hey guys, welcome back. Hey, do me a favor. If you're here, hit the like button on the video. I'd appreciate that. The subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, so you can see what's going on here. And after today's show, stick around. We got some great stuff coming up. Amani is going to be with us with Black Comic Universe right after this, and he's going to be covering the 10 best Black comics from the Bronze Age. So I'm actually probably going to stick around for that one. I think that's going to be cool. After that, Miss Jen's going to be here with Minute to Skim It, where she's going to go through some of the new books this week, skim through them real quick, tell you what she thinks, along with her crew. And then finally, for the final part of the night at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, I'll be back with producer Kyle, and we'll be going through in stores this week where we're going to talk about books like the Apache Delivery Service, the new Blade Runner issue, Pantha from Dynamite, the next Evil Ernie book, Buckhead. We got a lot of really cool books to talk about tonight. So stick around. We got a great lineup here on The Experience. All right, let's get back into Mockingbird. Where did my notes go? There we go. This is where John Byrne took over the book. And he brought Mockingbird back, even though she had left. And we find out that she's come back because she's given this kind of splinter group of S.H.I.E.L.D. a lot of information about the Avengers Mansion and security there. And the whole idea was, it was pitched to her that this was just in case, because the Vision had started taking over the world and then brought himself back. So S.H.I.E.L.D. was a little worried about him. So in case they ever had to take him down because he was getting out of control again, they wanted this information. Well, it turns out they wanted the information anyway and used it immediately and went in and abducted the Vision and dismantled him completely. Now, this is a big part of the comics, and it's part of the WandaVision storyline, in that when they put him back together, he no longer had his color. He was all white. He didn't have his personality or his memory. So basically, they re-put the body back together, but what made the Vision was now completely gone. So that's huge. And Mockingbird was the catalyst that allowed this outside group to even do that. Now, Mockingbird ends up tracking down Clint in hopes to reconcile. And the two of them decide, okay, look, Hawkeye's got this thing he has to do. Clint's heading to Wisconsin because there's this new group of heroes calling themselves the Great Lakes Avengers. So the two of them head out there. They find the team and they decide, you know what? Maybe we need to encourage this. Maybe we need to teach them and train them instead of just telling them, no, don't do it, because then they'll just change their name and do it anyway. So the two of them decide to stay there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to train these new heroes and also to work on their relationship. Now, it goes kind of bumpy. They split up again. It's not great, but the two of them end up back with the Avengers West Coast team. And we learn that the divorce is just about finalized. Mockingbird is then abducted by Ultron, and her brain patterns are used to make a second robotic bride called Alchema. Now, this is the second time Ultron's done this. The first time he used Janet Van Dyne's brain patterns and made Jocasta, so Alchema. And this, of course, they stop it. It's what they do. And Clint and Bobby rekindle their relationship finally after she is free. Now, this is very short-lived, though, as just afterwards, she would end up sacrificing herself to save Clint from Mephisto. Yeah, I know. We're not even supposed to use the M word anymore, but he's part of the comic here. So Mephisto, it is. Now, in the series, this all took place in the Avengers West Coast number 100, which came out in 1993. 2 issues later, they canceled the comic. The team disbanded because they were all mourning over the death of Mockingbird. So, yeah. Now, so Mockingbird is dead. But like with all comic characters, death is only a speed bump. She popped up again in 1998 as a reanimated corpse as a member of the Legion of the Unliving, part of a plot by the Grim Reaper to destroy the Avengers. And then in 1999... she is able to send a message from the afterlife, which leads to Hellcat being resurrected in the pages of Thunderbolt's annual number 2000, for the year 2000. And we'd see more of her in the Hellcat miniseries, which showed her in hell doing this endless battle. But we never find out why exactly she was in hell. Was it the whole letting Lincoln Slade die? Was it something else? We don't know. But then that whole idea is dropped, and in 2006, Pete Milligan is doing Ecstatics Presents Dead Girl, and he uses her as one of 3 people in a book club in heaven, along with Gwen Stacy and Moira McTaggart. And Mockingbird ends up helping Dead Girl and Doctor Strange stop a guy named Mr. Pitiful and a group of resurrected villains. So we never go back to the whole hell story. We also never really revisit the heaven story, because after that, things get weird. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, isn't this already weird? Nope. Now we're getting weird. She was resurrected as part of the Secret Invasion. Editor-writer Jim McCann convinced Brian Michael Bendis to bring her back as one of the characters to bring back, by pointing out that Hawkeye and Mockingbird were Marvel's version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which Bendis loved that idea. So her return was teased as part of a group of superheroes coming off of this crashed spaceship in the Savage Land. Yep, we came all the way back around to the Savage Land. Now, they claim to be genuine heroes having been abducted and replaced by Skrulls. Now, Clint believes this. He fully buys it because he tests her and asks her about this date. I think it's October 12th. And Bobby knows the importance of this certain date because this would have been the birthday, or was the expected birthday for a previously unmentioned miscarried child that the two had. So now we later discover that she actually is a Skrull and, not Bobby back, which infuriates Hawkeye, and he kills the Skrull in a rage. But Iron Man later discovers a Skrull ship in orbit, which actually does have a bunch of people who had been genuinely abducted by the Skrulls and replaced, and Mockingbird was one of them, and she and Clint are tearfully reunited. So, happily ever after, right? Nope, not even close. How are we doing on time? Am I going to make this? Oh, got to speed up just a little bit. It's a pretty convoluted history. Now, Bendis would continue to use the character as part of the New Avengers, which included Clint, but he was wearing the Ronin guise, so we all know him as Ronin now. Now, she even got a new costume in 2009, which is the one I think we used on the picture for today's episode. And they did this New Avengers reunion series, which focused on Mockingbird and Ronin taking on AIM and the Scientist Supreme Monica Rappaccini, I think it is. We also learned that she and a group of other former S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that had been abducted by Skrulls have put together this new espionage organization called World Counterterrorism Agency, or WCA. West Coast Avengers is kind of a nod to the team she was with Clint. We learned that the real Bobby had been replaced prior to Ultron's abduction, meaning that rekindling didn't happen and that the divorce that they had started still happened. So they two were technically not married anymore. They would go on to star in a series together that would really kind of play up on the whole Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibe. And even though they kind of rekindled their relationship again, they decided to stay unmarried. But the Hawkeye Mockingbird series was going to be an ongoing, got cut short at 6 issues. And then in the pages of New Avengers, Mockingbird gets gravely wounded in a raid of the Hammer warehouse. And she's only saved by the intervention of Nick Fury, who gives her this serum from the 1950s that combines elements of the Steve Rogers Super Soldier formula with the Infinity formula, which is what has preserved Nick Fury for so long. So it's a combination of that. Now, the formula saves her, but Fury can't predict what effects it'll have on her. And she makes a quick recovery, and it seems like she has some powers similar to Steve Rogers, but you don't really get a lot of exploration of that. And this is where Marvel starts kind of doing these weird projects. Like during Marvel Now, she ends up part of the Secret Avengers lineup and helped to capture the Taskmaster. Then she teams up with Spider-Man during the all-new, all-different Marvel phase, where she has to and she ends up having to deal with the Phantom Rider again. She meets Lance Hunter, and Lance Hunter is from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show, so they bring him into the series. And then she ends up hooking up and working with ForceWorks to take on a bunch of Deathlocks and Ultimo. And then at one point she ends up working with Quicksilver and Wonder Man during the Empire storyline to help bring down the Kree and Skrulls together to take on the Kotati. And if you don't remember the Kotati, we talked about them when we were doing the Swordsman's history. They're the ones that kept bringing him back to life, and the whole Mantis as the celestial goddess thing. Now, that's most of her comic history. On television, she was in the middle seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., working first as an undercover agent, and then as part of the main team with her ex-husband, Lance Hunter. There was a planned spin-off series featuring the two, and the characters were written out of the main series with that in mind. They were actually disavowed by the agency, and that was a big thing. Well, the pilot was filmed, but it never went to series. And even though they've tried to revive it once or twice with Palicki involved, and Nick Blood was the guy who played Lance Hunter, it never got off the ground. So what does this mean about Mockingbird in the MCU? most of her history ties into either Hawkeye or Kazar, and since the MCU isn't currently using their version of Tarzan, her best connections are with Clint. But this is an older Clint with a family, not the younger, womanizing Clint we have in the comics. So bringing in a new version of Mockingbird as a new romance, that wouldn't really work. So you either make her completely separate from Clint, or you have them be happily married with kids and just nod to her history that we didn't get to see play out. I really like the idea that Clint and Bobby got married and started a family. My first interaction with Mockingbird was in that original Hawkeye miniseries where they end up married at the end. I always think of them as a couple. It was something that there wasn't a lot of in comics. You had married, Hank and Janet were married, but that was always estranged. Vision and Wanda didn't really make a lot of sense. Clint and Bobby made a lot of sense to me. So I like the idea that maybe they have a happy ending in the MCU. And this is a great way for them to end up. Now, again, I would love to see them do something where we kind of flash back to them in action together, or there's something that they do have to work together. Because I think it's now set up that she was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And they haven't come out and said she's Mockingbird. They haven't come out and said any of that. They just gave us the fact that she has a watch with the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on it with the number 19. So it's insinuated, but it's never actually come out and said. So they can go a lot of different directions here. Like I said, I like the idea of them being a happily married couple. It just shows that, the MCU is finite in a lot of ways. They can only do so much with these characters, and then they have to move on. The actors move on, stuff like that. There's a reason we don't have Iron Man 4 and 5 and 6, because Robert Downey Jr. is like, look, I gave you 10 years, I'm done. Why we have Anthony Mackie in the Captain America costume now is because Chris Evans wants to do other things. So we're not going to be able to do all these storylines and do all the characters. Marvel has this butt ton of characters, and getting these little mentions here and there might be some of the best things we can do with some of these characters. I don't see them coming up with huge ways to use characters like the Shroud or Speedball. A lot of these characters are just going to be second stringers, third stringers, and they're not going to get the big moment in the sun. So I like the idea we'd still get Mockingbird. We see that there's a history. There is something about her. Now, there's still that air of mystery of why her watch would have blown her cover, what it would have meant. Was Mockingbird so notorious among the criminal underworld that if it got out that she's now living on this farm, there would be squadrons of helicopters coming in to kill her? We don't really get that answer. And I'm hoping we do, and eventually. But there are so many unanswered moments in the MCU that I could probably do an entire week's worth of shows just covering them. Like, okay, from phase 1, here are all the unanswered questions. Here's from phase 2, here's 3, here's 4. Yeah. So maybe I'll do that one day. We'll have to see. All right, guys, that wraps up our deep dive into Mockingbird. I hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something from it. Tomorrow, I am going to do... The crazy thing is, since we're now at the end of a year and we're going into the new year, I'm going to take a look at everything that Marvel has done with the MCU proper and kind of rank it. And there's a good chance you're going to disagree with me, so you're definitely going to tune in and share your opinions in the comments. On Thursday, we're going to talk about the second episode of Book of Boba Fett, which airs tonight/tomorrow morning. Hopefully we'll get a little more in on the rumor that Harrison Ford may pop up in the series. I'm not buying it. I don't think it's going to happen. But I didn't think Mark Hamill was going to show up either. So the only difference is that Mark Hamill loves playing Luke Skywalker and Harrison Ford is an old curmudgeon. Just saying. It's more likely he shows up in Book of Boba Fett as a Decker than it is as Han Solo. All right, guys, that wraps up the show. Thank you for tuning in. Please check out the Kickstarter. You can see the link in the comments. And have a great night. We'll be back at 8 p.m. Eastern for in-stores this week. Stick around for Amani, Black Comic Universe, the 10 best black comics of the Bronze Age. Good night, everybody.